Hi, my name's Sarah Alderson, and I'm the author of Hunting Lila, Losing Lila, Fated, and my new book is called Severed, and it's the sequel to Fated. Um, I'm just going to read the start of Severed to give you a little taster. Excuse me. Okay, chapter 1. The headlights of the car punctured the black blanket sky, illuminating rolling countryside, which ceded eventually to the sprawl of suburbs and then finally to the brutal glare of the city. But Evie barely noticed. She didn't even ask Lucas where they were going. As she clenched and unclenched her hands, which were still sticky with blood, all she could think about was what had happened back in Riverview and about the dead they'd left behind. She stared down at her bare feet, which were laced with dirt and mud, and the stomach-churning remains of scorched thirster flesh, and her teeth began chattering so loudly that Lucas reached over and cranked up the heat in the car to full. Evie snuck a surreptitious sideways glance at him as he drove, his arms taut as they gripped the wheel. In the dim light from the dash, he looked more unhuman than human. His eyes had a wolf-like intensity to them, and his skin seemed to gleam and merge with the shadows. He was half human, half shadow warrior, able to pass in both worlds. But it was so damn obvious that he had unhuman blood in him that she couldn't believe she'd never noticed it before. What kind of a hunter was she? Even the way her body reacted when he was around, her heart thrumming in her chest like it was an animal trying to burrow its way free, her breathing running tight and fast, should have alerted her. Her brain and her body had been trying to warn her all along that Lucas was the enemy. But her heart had told her something else entirely, so she'd willfully ignored all the signs and shut out the sound of her instincts screaming. Other than for the times his eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, Lucas hadn't once lifted his gaze away from the road since they'd got in the car. He hadn't said a word either. He was too focused on driving with his foot to the floor, as though they had an army of thirsters and mixin demons on their heels, which quite possibly they did, but Evie didn't want to contemplate that. She couldn't. Not right now. She sunk back into the cool leather of her seat and instead thought back to what Lucas had told her just a few hours ago in Victor's boutique. He'd broken his oath to the Brotherhood. For her. She knew the penalty for that was death. As did he. But he'd done it anyway, and all because he claimed to love her. Did he? Evie felt her heart stutter. He was here, wasn't he? He'd risked everything for her. He'd stood by her side as they'd fought off both hunters and unhumans to escape Riverview. And what was more, he believed that she was the one who was going to end the war that had raged for over 1,000 years between unhumans and hunters. Evie closed her eyes. Did she believe it too? We're here. Her eyes snapped open. Lucas had parked up on a dark street. Evie looked out her window. Where had Lucas brought her? She knew there was somewhere in Los Angeles, and judging from the scruffy state of the apartment block he had parked up in front of, they weren't in the Beverly Hills part, but that was all she knew. She was about to ask him what they were doing there, but he had already got out of the car. She watched him as he walked round to her side. He looked like he'd been in a fight. Several fights, actually, to the death, which would be accurate. His dark hair was matted and sticking together in clumps. His shirt was ripped and streaked with blood. A red bloom just over his heart marked the spot where her own knife had pierced the skin. She shuddered at the memory of the tip scraping the bone and of what she'd almost done. He opened her door and she climbed out, her muscles cramping, then yelling in protest. Where are we? She asked, taking the deserted street. It was still dark outside. Dawn hadn't even begun to lighten the sky. Lucas didn't answer her. He just took a deep breath, grimaced, and strode towards the entrance of the apartment block, looking over his shoulder once to check that Evie was following. Whatever you do, Lucas said, shooting Evie a warning glance as he buzzed entry and then led her inside towards the stairwell. Don't tell them who you are or what you are. They don't need to know. Evie's heart slammed to a standstill. She stared at Lucas, dazed. She had no intention of declaring to a total stranger that she was a half-trained hunter with zero powers and a debilitating inability to actually slay any demons, and she had even less intention of announcing herself Messiah-like as the white light come to sever the realms. But who the hell were they? Okay, I'll leave it at that. Cool. Anyway, I hope if you enjoyed Fated and Hunting Lila and Losing Lila that you will enjoy Severed. The third book in the Fated series is out in March 2013. So be sure to check back, and I will post an early little teaser for that as well. Okay, thank you, bye.